I faced the future boldly, with 2 eager open eyes, and I picked a couple nuggets up that blew my fucking mind. Like you can taxidermy someone while they're technically alive, and they'll shine when it's election time. See, the Democratic voter base will pay them zero. Never mind if voting for the scarecrow is a vote along their party lines. They could stare into its marble eyes and claim there's something dignified. Unlike real politicians, this one doesn't need an oxygen or kit supply. But its function is the same as those who came before. The goals are never misaligned. It still spends all its working time performing pre-recorded fleecing sessions where it sugarcoats your slow and hungry genocide, while pouring billions into Nazi coffers, all the while selling you the story that we're moments till the MiGs arrive. So fuck it, ask Zelensky if he'll help replace our leaded pipes. Watch a fleet of Penske's show stacks of bills in every size. Guess it only took a black sun and a couple Hiles. Honorary goose step and some Nazi boots a quarter mile, all while Biden sneers his sordid smile. I don't know what was in this morning's vial, but it makes him stare 1,000 yards through all the prompters and the cards like he can smell the nearest child. His eyes are wide and wild, wider than the grave in which another 1,000 families were tossed in as I typed until they rose up to the sky unceremoniously piled.
1 eternity later.
Which sort of flies right in the face of all this network ticker tape where the American economy has superhuman vitals.
And sometimes some people come along with a hammer.
See, I like to think my trial's gonna play like a recital. I'll denounce the world around me and accuse the most entitled, who weaponize their titles, whose pull is something tidal, who'd starve us all to death to best delight their blighted idol. So they might destroy the record, and I will never get to vinyl. So my word is not immortal, but it's final.
It's a brilliant, powerful hammer. It's a brilliant, powerful hammer to smash that facade.
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to say. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe?
Fresh off the masses, the brand new cancerous growth, who has come here to vie for your vote. Come here to cry at the camps and to mourn at the shore for the bodies that float by the wreck of an immigrant boat. Then it's back to their luxury home, couple security booths and a moat. Couple cigars, little escargot, little booze and a soak. Just breathe in the steam and the smoke. Pink salt, lavender, candles are low. Shit, when you do what you do, gotta lighten the load. And he got a life of his own that's a sight to behold. And it's a lot to control, to decipher the code or to siphon the soul. The cost of a good night's sleep for the working elite is a bargain no matter the toll. Worth any wager, and that comes straight from the mouth of the means to the goal that will swallow us whole. Ripe for the picking if you don't mind mold, and you know I don't. Maybe we're pleasantly prone, maybe we're taking a licking, compliantly ticking and ticking and ticking, but never explode. No, I don't deliver the prettiest image, but damn if it isn't an accurate vision of natural fission, of rage at the system and abject heartbreak, patiently waiting for any who will listen. That little blue bird who was watching your words is a federal carrier pigeon, a Langley first. It's a patient observer who hears what it wants and is trained for the worst. Oh, you got nothing to hide. They'll be the ones to decide that after they root through your purse, after they read all your text, after they raid your apartment, confiscate all of its contents, then conjure up evidence out of the air on a wing and a prayer and malicious intelligence nonsense. Any presumption of innocence long since gone, right along with your comforts and constants. Historically first they will come for the communists. So why in the fuck would I say I'm a communist? Well, it might be I love my community more than the monsters of opulence who are holding us hostage, who are vomiting promises. Might be I'm all done seeing our pensions and benefits harvested. Might be I'm all done watching the populace being disarmed in the guise of an armistice. Watching a woman collapse on the floor who will rise no more. She is wheeled out the door and you're next in line for the pharmacist. If you can get me to vote, it's a hard no confidence. But part of the charm of deception is politics wearing the mask of incompetence. It's all in the art of austerity, darling. It's all in the slide of the providence. Until home is as wide as your cubicle height and is only as deep as your coffin is. Maybe I'm miles away from impatience, aching to break off the head of the snake where the capital lust, reptile brain, and the margin of profit is. Like off with his. Like off with his.
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe?
Of the free, and you'll know us by the trail of dead. It's just one more world war to complete the set. When you live by the pike, you die by the pith. You die wide-eyed, still pleading the fifth, or crying divine epithets and pathetic attempts at defense. All empathetic for those on your side of the fence. Well, I'll gladly put you and your legacy into an alternate tense of faltering senses and altered events. Like hun, it ain't a hearse, it's a reaper's stretch. How sweet, she said. Bunch of hordes in the street like it's Evil Dead. Where the thin blue line meets razor's edge. And where the corporate ladder ascends to a steel-toed boot that awaits on the ledge. You'll be licking it fresh at your boss's request till it stomps each finger and watches you fall to your death. And drown in an ocean of debt. Gone with the fodder who gathered to honor the patient left, who purity tested themselves into sections, step by step, till the next election, when it's just one them and the sound of their well-read theorized breath. That's harm reduction for the lowly cost of you holding your nose and just openly buying the theft. Maybe that's all in the flick of the pen. Maybe we're all one unmarked van from a trip to the pen, being guarded by pigs who exist on a diet of dying breaths of much worthier men. Honey, heaven's expecting you. Just don't get too hung up on who they let in. Just look up at the shine of the pearly gates. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the paint. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the water, lead in the milk, lead in the honey, lead in the caustic embrace of the Heavenly Father. Lead is the flavor of passive perpetual slaughter. Lead is the taste of us led to the ledge by the lure of the legend of expert consensus. and then beckon to stretch it just one step farther. And I hope all the folks who were boastfully gloating and toasting themselves as the heroes of COVID for boosting their boosters and doing their part are now equally thrilled to be starstruck martyrs. All laid in a government grave with anonymous markers, like you're back from the carvers and off to the splicer. You're the very first wave to be slain in the war against Pfizer. That 100 years war against Pfizer. They are thinning the crowd that is striking right now to bleed adequate pay from those inhuman misers, who all sit in their office and designate coffins to people regarded as nothing but profit for Kaiser. Still the Dems want you nicer. Dems want you softer. Dems want you kinder. Yeah, they all want you graciously starving in silence. You will speak when you're spoken to. Rest of the time, you and all of us peasants are merely depressing statistics neglected in Congress's binders. All bled, bone dry, then fed to the grinder. Our headstones line each step as reminders. That's a lesson in object permanence learned in the furnace by workers consigned to the fire. Workers bled, bone dry, then fed by the fed to the grinder. Fed by the fed to the grinder. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Now the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. And the Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, bleeds you dry, then dines on the dead. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. The Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see it, it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your mind, that it grinds yourself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led.
What's up, everybody? It's another episode of Iron and News. It's me, Reef Breland, with my co-host, as always, Collin Radix-Carter, aka Care Bear. How are you, Care Bear?
Ooh, good.
We're here on a Saturday.
Yeah, we're here on a Saturday.
We were lazy and
We
didn't
needed
want
a
to do
break.
Wednesday. Yeah.
Well, no. Well, to be very fair to you, you've done every episode for INN News since we started, and this past Wednesday, well, Tuesday, I had a migraine, had a lot of work I needed to catch up on for my actual job, and both of us were just like, we're not feeling this today.
Wow.
Let's take a night off and try and reconvene today. And I think actually that worked in our favor because we actually have
Yeah, I think we have better
great
stories.
stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, just felt like this past Wednesday, there wasn't really any stories that we really felt drawn to cover. But that's changed since within the last 72 hours. So yeah, we're here
Yep.
on the Saturday. We'll be around on Wednesdays generally, so don't worry about that. But yeah, we just needed a break. So hope you guys understand. But thank you guys for being appreciative and supportive and just allowing us to take a mental health break for a bit. But yeah, we're here.
Oh shit.
Yeah, thank you,
Here we
guys.
go again.
We're here. We did pull some stories that we did want to cover. So I'm going to talk about our boy Justin Pearson, who got reinstated to Senate State House of Representatives over the last couple of days. He's kind of come out of nowhere, and I do want to talk about him in terms of, to me, this just seems like a play for higher office to me, and I'll kind of explain why.
Yeah.
And then this was a thing. I didn't see many people in the space talk about this. We've mentioned this many times, but Biden officially has declared COVID to no longer be an issue. So as of Monday, we are no longer under a national emergency. That's very different from a public emergency, which I'll explain, but we're kind of in the more or less in the beginnings of a country moving away from being in what we can call a pandemic, as we kind of adjust to having COVID be endemic. So we're going to talk about that and the implications of that. And what do you have, Reef?
Well, I wanted to do a bit of an update on what's happening in Paris, a few things. Paris When It Sizzles, I thought would be a good title if anyone's seen that film. That's an oldie but a goodie. And I brought something for you, Care Bear. Pre-K workers fight New York City Council, specifically Mayor Adams. We'll get into it because the unions didn't want them to do this. So they
didn't want them to strike.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
So
why does it not surprise me?
Why? Well, we'll get into it. And we'll see how it might apply to other members of unions and so on. But wanted to give shout outs. We were on Thursday, we were on with Oz and Shanda. Little game show. That was fun.
Trivia.
Yeah, we all tied, so we're gonna have to have another battle next time. It was a 3-way tie. And last night Tar Reed had Ray McGovern on. That was a good show. People should check that out as well. If they haven't already. But you ready to get into our first one?
Yeah, let's get into it. So as I said, our magic boy of the hour, Justin Pearson, part of the Tennessee Free. Well, actually, can I say this now? Because it was him, Justin. I forgot the other Justin's name, and then there was a third person who didn't get, pushed out of the Tennessee House of Representatives. So why are they calling them the Tennessee Free? If anything, it should be the Tennessee 2, but whatever, or the Justin 2, whatever you want to call it, but whatever. So anyway, I digress. Pearson got reinstated this week back in the State House in Tennessee, and there we go. And as reported by BBC, one of the few times we'll probably use BBC as a source, written by Chloe Kim, where she writes, Justin Pearson becomes second expelled Tennessee lawmaker to be reinstated. And she continues. The second of two Tennessee lawmakers expelled from the state legislature after leading a gun control protest on the chamber floor has been reinstated. Justin Pearson, 29, got his seat back after a unanimous vote from 7 members of the Shelby County Board of Commissioners. His colleague Justin Jones, 27, was similarly voted back to the Tennessee House of Representatives on Monday. The 2 Democrats were expelled last week by the Republican-run State House. They were removed days after a school shooting in Nashville that left 6 people dead, including 3 children. After Wednesday's vote, Mr. Pearson addressed the crowd saying, "You can't expel hope, you can't expel justice, you can't expel our voice, and you sure can't expel our fight. We look forward to continuing to fight." The Shelby County Board of Commissioners, mostly made up of Democrats, sent the young legislature back to the State House to represent House District 86, which includes Memphis. Both Pearson and Jones will serve as interim representatives. Special elections will occur in the coming months, and both lawmakers said they plan to run. I'm going to talk more about that in a bit. I think that it's important that the people of District 86 are represented by the person that they voted overwhelmingly to have in office, said Shelby County Commission Chairman Michael Lowry in an interview. Before Wednesday's vote, Mr. Pearson led a march starting at the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. "This is the democracy that is going to lift up the victims of gun violence instead of supporting the NRA and the gun lobbyists," he told supporters. Republican members had accused 3 Democrats, Mr. Pearson, Mr. Jones, and Gloria Johnson, of bringing disorder and dishonor to the chamber when they led protesters at the State House on March 30th. Ms. Johnson narrowly survived an expulsion vote. Republicans said she played a smaller role in the protest and did not use a megaphone. Ms. Johnson, who is white, gave another explanation. "It might have to do with the color of our skin," she said. Mr. Pearson and Mr. Jones were Black. A group of Senate Democrats called on the Department of Justice to investigate the expulsion of Mr. Pearson and Mr. Jones to determine whether any violations of the United States Constitution or federal civil rights laws have occurred. The letter was signed by Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock, Pastor Raphael Warnock, among others. Yeah, I had to.
Pasta, you know.
I had to give that a little inflection given what I've said about him.
I mean, we've got Pastor Warnock involved. We got the seasoning mogul Lowry involved. Like that seasoned salt be making a lot of money for people.
But
Lowry's.
Anyway, there's a little bit more to this article. Nashville Mayor John Cooper appeared at the council meeting on Monday for Mr. Jones, where he told the chamber the expulsion vote was unprecedented. "Let's give the district their voice back. I call this body to give them their voice back now," he said. Mr. Jones and Mr. Pearson between them represent about 140,000 constituents in the state. Some constituents told BBC News they felt disenfranchised by the vote to oust the pair, known as the Justins. President Joe Biden also criticized the move as undemocratic. The use of expulsion in the Tennessee State House had only previously been used twice since the Civil War. What did you say?
Oh, he would know what undemocratic would be.
Well, I would argue, is our country democratic?
No.
Oh, no. So you can't know something if we never had it.
Oligarchy.
Something. Any thoughts on this? And I know we kind of talked about this a little bit last night, but any thoughts on this before I continue? Because I do have opinions. And I'm sure a lot of you in the chat will probably kind of guess where I kind of lie on this. But I'm curious to hear what you think of all of this. This has been in the sphere for a while.
Yes.
And I'm actually kind of glad we kind of held off on this and not reported before while everyone else was talking about it. And especially since a lot more stuff has come out since then. But
yeah. Well, I know people are upset about his MLK impression. But I mean, the fact that they want to kick, he used a megaphone, like really, like that's what we're going with. Like, you're. It's like no, there's no good PR teams anymore. It's like you're making them martyrs. If you wanted to actually fight them, sending them out of the courthouse is not how to do that. That actually strengthens their appeal.
Here's the thing with
Like,
that, because I'm not totally against that, because the
sure.
idea of politics is there is some acting involved. That's just the
Yes.
reality of
You
it.
ever heard of
The question is,
the mace? There's I think Congress has a mace, like an actual mace, like a big stick with a
as
ball
it
on the end.
wall,
Right. It's used for purposes like this, supposedly. Right. If you look it up, right. Where like it's only been used like 6 times ever. Right. But it's essentially like you have to come to Congress or we'll hit you with this stick. Like that's essentially it literally the power of America embodied by a stick. They'll bring it out. They'll occasionally just
right?
like wheel it out as like symbolism, right? And that is very similar to this, right? Where it's like, oh, we've only thrown out a couple of people, but we'll throw you out, you know?
Right.
So it's like, well, just go get the mace. Just hit them with the mace. Like they'll straighten up, you know? It literally, I think it was used to like help quell a riot with like Andrew Jackson and stuff like that. Like in the halls of Congress and stuff, there was like a big brawl and they brought out the mace for that. It's like it seems like a movie, you know? Like, okay. We're like, oh, it's Abraham Lincoln with a steel chair. Like, you know. Anyway.
But look, but all of that to say is I don't mind necessarily the theatrics or the props if you mean something behind it.
Yes.
And then like if you've been vetted and this is kind of goes along with what I've said before, I really think a lot of these politicians, if you want to, especially if you want to move up into federal office, kind of need to prove themselves on a local level and kind
Yeah.
of so that people can vet you properly in terms of what's your record? What have you done? What have you accomplished in your city and town or whatever that could be elevated, or at least these issues can be elevated on the federal level? More often than not, we hear a lot of these like no-name politicians who, for whatever reason or another, just pop up,
Yeah.
you know, in the discourse in political media. And this kind of reminds me somewhat of AOC in a sense, because now, back around, like, I only started becoming
When she
more
was
politically.
bringing the ruckus.
Well, I just say for me, I only became more politically more motivated around, I'll say 2017. And I really didn't know about AOC up until when she won. You know, and obviously just following her since. But even to me back then, and I wasn't watching independent media at the time, so it wasn't like I was following her in this space. But to me, she just kind of appeared out of nowhere and immediately became this darling in the Democratic Party. And I see not necessarily Justin Jones. I think Justin Pearson has gotten a lot more play than him. But all that to say, since he's basically appeared, there has been some issues with him that are beginning to pop up. Case in point, so this is an article from the Federalist. Now, I know Federalist is right wing, and the person who's writing this, Peachy Keenan, just reading through this, she's kind of snarky in terms of her critique on Justin, but there is some stuff here that I do think is kind of apparent with him based on what I've seen of him and what she kind of brings out in terms of this political theater that does exist among both parties that Justin Pearson is kind of playing into now. So she writes, move it. There you go. All right.
Oh, Hilaria Baldwin. Do you know of Hilaria Baldwin?
I do
Right
know
off
Hilaria
the.
Baldwin.
Do you know why
Right
she's
off the
putting
bat.
this? Why she's putting this in
Yep.
here?
And she's going to mention why. But
Okay.
Hilaria Baldwin, Hillary Clinton, Elizabeth Warren, Justin Trudeau. There's a long list of white Democrats who love putting on theoretical blackface to try
Rhetorical,
appearing less
yes.
white, more ethnic, and more authentically authentic.
Mm.
Hilaria Baldwin, née Hillary Haywood Thomas, famously became Spanish after a single semester abroad in Spain, despite not actually being Spanish and living her whole life in the United States.
Okay,
Can you
pause.
zoom out?
Yes.
Okay.
So
But go ahead.
this whole thing with Hilaria, she was on like one of those morning talk show news shows, and she's literally lived most of her life in the United States, and she was literally like put on the accent, right? And was like, how you say cucumber? Like it was like that bad. It was it was bad, you know?
Right. No, I remember that because I remember that being in the news for a while. But anyway, Justin Trudeau is a subject matter expert in all forms of blackface, as he demonstrates whenever he dons Indian, feather, and dot muffy. Sandy Cortez, theater kid from Westchester, was rebranded as a fiery Latina to win her seat in office. Also, you know, she was from the Bronx. She was born in the Bronx, but raised in Westchester County. So I think people forget that about her, but we continue. Who is the audience of these clickbait performances? Well, the usual suspects, of course, middle-aged, liberal, white women. These lowly ladies gobble up fake ethnicities, feel-good cultural stereotypes, and white guilt like they're gobbling chocolate-covered antidepressants.
That's a great product. Someone make that right now. Like Percocet bonbons needs to happen. You know?
50 Shades of Patriarchal Oppression is their titillation of choice. These vapid virtual signalers have just discovered their new cultural warrior of the week, a man who makes their rusty innards churn, a man who sends a tingle up their leg to body parts they haven't felt like
since they first
saw Barack Obama at the 2004 DNC convention. As I said, she's very snarky, but I just love her. I just love her humor here. The object of the adulation is a 27-year-old Tennessee politician named Justin Pearson. Pearson is enjoying worldwide fame at the moment as the most visible member of the Tennessee Free local state representatives who incited an insurrection inside the state house in favor of gun control after the school shooting on April 3rd.
Yep.
When I first saw Justin Pearson in his 1970s strip, I thought it was a joke. Were the 70s really this back? Did I need to buy myself some cork platform sandals and start popping lewds?
Oh.
Pearson is a state rep by day and a preacher by night. Here's one of the recent sermons. We're not going to play it now. At a Memphis Unitarian Universalist church that began with a prayer to Mother God and an invitation for dead ancestors to speak for him. To anyone who hates this essay, please note that it was written by my dead ancestors speaking through me. Blame them, okay? Pearson also sports a comically huge Spaceball-style afro that towers over his narrow frame. It acts as an angelic halo for his unassailable divinity. He delivers speeches in the mellifluous cadence familiar to anyone who has attended a black church in the Deep South,
or a white church in the Deep South. Let's be clear there too, because we stole that shit everywhere. Like,
right.
It's good. It's a good bit. Like, we're using it.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So
employing a sing-song voice and a pulpit pounding performance. Yeah. As some of his superfans noted in my tweet about him, this is how black preachers talk. Okay. What's the big deal, racist? Preacher's gonna preach. That's fine. The Mother God is working through him and filling him with the holy woke spirit. But it does seem a little odd for him to do the same poultry-worthy performance in the context of his job as in the viral speech he gave in the State House last week. So we'll continue, and then I do have a clip. that kind of shows this.
Okay.
If you remember Arsenio Hall doing his preacher character in Coming to America, or saw the Robert Townsend cult 80s comedy Hollywood Shuffle, you might be forgiven for thinking Pearson's persona is all a bit much. The hair, the disco ties, the suits, the cadence, is he for real? Or is he doing what I can only call a modern-day minstrel show for clout? My friend Inez Stedman recently sent me the video of Justin Pearson from 2016 taken when he was a student at Bowdoin College. Bowdoin, those of you who may know, is a liberal arts college in Maine. So, Maine. Yeah. So here's what he sounded like back then. So
let me do this, and there we go. And I'll throw this on.
I'm running for president of PSG. There are a few reasons that we're running this campaign this year. One has to do with representation. How can we represent all voices in a conversation? I wanted to do this by partnering with organizations from the Bowdoin Democrats to the Bowdoin Republicans. I want to bring together different voices, dissenting voices, voices that may be more liberal or more conservative, in order that we can reach a point of sort of the radical middle.
Seemed like the NRA and gun lobbyists might win. But
yeah, I mean, that's a
good news for us.
Big difference.
I don't know how long this Saturday in the state of Tennessee might last. But oh, we have good news, folks. We've got good news that Sunday always comes.
Proselytize, brother. Proselytize.
So you definitely hear the difference between 2016 and now.
Clearly. I mean, you could argue the code switching is the first video.
Right.
That he's much more used to performance in his second voice.
Right. But as a black person, in regards to that, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You know, given the environment in a predominantly white school, you somewhat seemingly, and I think especially for me, I felt this too, the idea that you have to, quote unquote, act white in order for you to be someone accepted. So I don't necessarily, I hate it, but I understand it in terms of
the classic, like, mild-mannered, what do they call Obama? Like, articulate and... Like,
I mean, even Joe Biden made that comment, like, he speaks so well. He's very articulate bullshit, as if, like...
Right, as if black people can't speak well.
Cannot be articulate or shouldn't be articulate. So I get that from this context, you know, especially what I've gone through personally. But this shift from going from that to this, what we're seeing right now from him, is definitely a little jarring. And as I said, and as you know, that what was already said, this, I wouldn't argue this may not even so much appeal to white women, but more like, maybe it does.
Like wine moms.
Yeah, maybe it does, but I feel this mostly appeals to black boomers. Older black boomers who are in church, who understand that cadence, who more likely are going to church. So it kind of gives that nostalgia, as you said, of MLK.
Well, it's like here in the South too, right? Mastermind being like, I was in the South for 3 months and picked up an accent. Yes, you pick up a slight accent. Like, people can tell I've lived in the South. But that doesn't mean I put on the fucking, like, there's a voice. Buster. Well, it's not even that. It's like there's a Southern accent that, like, you know, well, if I start talking like this and shit, and, you know, you guys, like I can start making it more and more Southern. And, like, the people who actually talk like that, I don't believe them. Like, that's not your real voice. You're doing that to do that. You are making yourself seem country specifically to be more country. Like,
it just, the idea of using that voice to me in general, especially in the black church, in a sense, kind of comes off as very authentic, disingenuous to me.
It's
because it's almost like the idea of, like, you're tuning up. Yeah. You're tuning up for the hoop. You're tuning up in terms of, like, telling people this is the house that God is going to bless you with, or this is the car that God is going to bless you with.
Classic
like
fire and brimstone. Well, we're going to take it to the mountaintop. And it's very like, I get it. And I get you probably do that as a pastor frequently. I would think that pastor was being cliche. Having said that, like, I've seen pastors do it well, So, like, I would argue, Brother Cornell has a bit of this, but he speaks like that normally all the time.
So,
like it's what he grew up with, and around. Always reverent.
But yeah, so as Peachy is mentioning in this article, it's the idea of like, it'd be one thing if he was doing that all the time, but it does come off as disingenuous, especially seeing that clip. He wasn't talking like that back then. And in certain situations, he's still not talking like that, and we're going to get to that. But anyway, as podcaster Amy Therese notes, Justin Pearson was a normal, middle-class, clean-cut black college student in 2016 when he ran for SPG president. He spoke about bringing together liberals and conservatives to meet in the radical middle and waxed lyrical about the importance of hearing every voice.
Yeah.
Red flag for me right there. If you
sounds great.
Right there. Well, it sounds good to the normies.
Yes.
But I think, but to meet in the radical middle, what does that mean? I would argue that there is no meaning of radical middle. So I think even there it's just kind of like
I didn't even catch that. Radical, biggest oxymoron ever uttered.
Right.
Radical middle. You literally can't have a middle that's that's why it's called a middle. You know?
Right. You should be, if you're looking at the Overton window, like as far left as at least in terms of like, on that side.
Well, it reminds me of Hillary Clinton with hot sauce in her bag. It's pandering.
It is.
Yeah.
But anyway, in his 2016 video, as we saw, Pearson speaks to the camera and makes a good case for becoming the next Bowdoin student body president. He is a strikingly handsome, clean-cut, afro-less, and sports a nice suit. He's like a black's Alex P. Keaton.
Yep.
But it's his voice that is startling. Shockingly, he shows no trace of a strong Southern accent. Instead, he uses an Obama-esque white accent that could step smartly into any network newsroom. This kid is going places, you might think. I agree. But when you see and hear Justin Pearson today, you think, who groomed him? Who decided to brownwash him to be a lot less Bowdoin and a lot more boondocks, as Inez Stepman puts it? Answer, Princeton. After Bowdoin, he won a spot at his elite public policy and international affairs junior summer institute at the Woodrow Wilson School, a grooming program for future political leaders. These scouts are looking for the next Obama, the way of basketball scouts seek the next Michael Jordan. So far, all we got is a Canadian Obama, Trudeau, gay Obama, Buttigieg, an American psycho Obama, Newsom, whose Obama impression remains undefeated. Some may insist Pearson is just code switching. You ignorant white person. Okay, you can call it what you want, but it's still putting on a performance. Code switching involves adjusting one's style of speech, appearance, behavior, and expression in ways that will optimize the comfort of others in exchange for fair treatment, quality service, and employment opportunities. Research suggests that code switching often occurs in spaces where negative stereotypes of Black people run counter to what are considered appropriate behaviors and norms for a specific environment.
It also speaks to a private and public position. If you have a private and public appearance.
Exactly.
So,
was his white Bowdoin persona a survival mechanism? I would guess probably.
Probably. Yeah.
Or was that the real Justin, the nice suburban middle-class son of a prosperous minister.
Bingo, bingo.
Maybe Justin Pearson is something new, black to black trans. He was groomed and radically affirmed in a transition from normie Obama-esque centrist into a more politically desired racial stereotype for the current era. Militant activist race revolutionary. He got his Colin Kaepernick glow up, as Amy Therese put it. This all is taking place in the wake of an awful event everyone has since forgotten, the massacre at a nearby Nashville Christian school. In honor of the free murdered students and free adults killed by one of their own, a left-wing woman pretended to be a man. The radicals are now marching for freedom and justice right over the newly dug graves of 9-year-olds. It's a galling display of the raw political power tactics the supervillains on the left excel at. I would argue the center. That's not us on the left.
Yeah, it's yeah.
After all, why waste time mourning dead kids killed by one of your own when you can flip a white-on-white issue shooting around the checks notes black civil rights issue? Maybe Pearson was radicalized by losing his campaign for Bowdoin student council president. In response, he turned full Joker, or his case, full punchline. So again, snarky, but I think
the whole one of your own is kind of a weird way to phrase that.
Right. But I feel like I definitely feel that in the space, even for us, there's definitely more of a shift now in terms of, moving to the more clean-cut Obama-esque into the more radicalized, like Hotep person, I think, especially as far as politics, especially among Black people. But, so it's almost kind of taking that extreme to the other way sometimes, depending on the situation. But I think it's the idea of like, it's almost not cool to be like considered white and boring. Like you have to be
look
like,
at what they did with AOC too, because she was
right,
kind of middle class and boring, and they turned into like a Latina bartender
from the Bronx,
right? So
it's
but occasionally they'll pull that stuff out, like when she gets heckled or whatever, she'll suddenly put that accent on,
right?
So
I do want to play this because, as I said, I don't necessarily mind the theatrics. If this is for something. Now, again, Justin Pearson did this. He called for gun control, which fine. For an all-white school, I presume. So for whatever, fine. But as a Black person, it's okay, I think, to ask, all right, so especially if you're a politician, what are you going to do for Black people? So Teslyn Figaro was on the Breakfast Club. She asked him, what's your Black policy for? And notice a couple of things. Notice what he says and how he says it to her. So go ahead, once this stops buffering.
Tell me about your Black policy, not about everybody and help everybody. You represent 60% Black. Tell me how your gun reform or whatever policy you're working on, do you support reparations? Some people said you didn't, and then others said you did. Like, give us a quick rundown specifically on Black people that you represent in your district.
Yeah, I am 100% pro-Black. And here's the reality that we got to talk about. When you do for Black folk, everybody does benefit.
Yeah, we know, but I'm gonna ask you about the Black policy.
So I am. I got you.
Want to know about your policy?
My policies. Exactly.
What's
when you think about reparations, I'm 100% for reparations. I have been for a very long time. For cash, for credit, for check, for credit card, for trust fund, and I was on Bev Johnson, another member.
Go ahead, Reef. I know you.
The iHeartRadio community in January, and I explained the reason why I'm for reparations.
Oh, can't hear you, Reef.
I was just saying, like, that's all just money. He just listed money.
Right. But notice the voice.
Yes.
He didn't use that preacher cadence with Teslyn or anyone else on the Breakfast Club.
It's much more, but it's also not quite his voice for his college, like, videos.
No.
right? It's like
And I think
somewhere
that's
in between both of them.
right. So I can, again, like
he's trying
you
to
know,
be cool
I can,
Obama guy. Like,
right.
yeah.
You know, but go ahead. Continue.
Isn't just because of the enslavement of black people, because there are some people who say, well, you weren't enslaved, and then we have to walk through housing segregation, we got to walk through lynching, we got to walk through mass incarceration, which we're experiencing now. What about reparations for all of these harms that we have experienced all the way up into the present day?
Are you willing to put it on your website though, because it's not under your website on issues?
Yeah.
Are you willing to do that? Okay.
I'm willing to do that. It is not the issue that people in District 86 are saying is number one for them. Because to the point that was made earlier, they're definitely concerned about safety. They're concerned about crime. A lot of my population is also elderly. And so you'll see on the website, aging justice. There's not enough money in Social Security to actually help elders live out.
This is called obfuscating, by the way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The idea of him saying, oh, my constituents don't care about reparations. Excuse me?
Yeah, excuse me? Where? Well, we know someone specifically near there, right? Do we not? That asked recently, a Miss Marianne Williamson.
We'll get
about
there,
reparations?
and we're gonna get. Oh no, we're gonna get there. But yeah, like you know, we'll get there. But yeah, let's finish this though, because that was kind of like, okay, you are not serious at all. But we'll listen to you at least for this clip. And
out the rest of their lives in a
then we're
meaningful
going to
way.
expose you a bit.
So policies that we're putting forward have to do with people being able to grow old well, which not only include financial increases in money, but creating opportunities for them to gather and to have community. I live in the most polluted, one of the most polluted districts in the state. And so, God rest their souls, both my grandmothers have died of cancer. My grandmother Pearson, grandmother Gwen.
Remember, he was started
due to environmental
they asked him about reparations.
Disproportionately hurts black people and poor people. So both my grandmothers lived in a community, this community I live in now, where there are 17 toxic release inventory facilities that are polluting our air, water, and our soil. And so the black policy that I have, as you articulated it so well, is finding where there are the injustices in environment and education, dealing with gun violence and everything that we can do, putting the resources toward them, because it's indeed the majority of my district that's being impacted, but the effects of it continue to be on everybody. And what is important to note here is that for us to seek and to be a part of liberation, and this is really important, the people who do have the resources also have a responsibility. And so when I talk about white people's engagement and involvement, it is not to say I'm just concerned about what they think or what they feel. It's because I believe white people and people of privilege and power have a responsibility of choosing a social location with the people who are being marginalized, because they have our money and our resources, and they have a lot of what they have because of what we do not.
But except,
okay. So that means you know the problem.
Yes.
You know the problem, but your priorities were first climate change and elderly care over what this lady just asked you. Essentially, you just said, I'd rather do these other things,
right,
than like reparations, even though that's what you asked about.
But not even that is the idea of, okay, you took up gun control, which, given your district, was, I would argue, at least in this situation,
against your constituency.
Well, no, but it was basically a white suburb problem.
Yes,
essentially, you know. So you took up their charge, and you're getting love from them. Fine, whatever. But as Teslin was asking you, what are you going to do for black people? And you kind of skated that. And to prove that, and I'm going to be very transparent, I went on his website.
Okay.
And Reef knows this. I pulled this up last night. Okay. So, because I was just kind of curious. So I pulled up a couple of things. You can go to his website. If you want after this, but although you're not going to find much, honestly. So he talks about, one thing that I did pull up for you guys is healthcare for all, Medicaid expansion, and healthcare. Healthcare is a human right. Tennessee has refused to expand Medicaid, which has left many people vulnerable and one accident away from being further entrenched into poverty, and leaders must be dedicated to protecting the health of children and the elderly, most especially in its important that we protect reproductive rights. Right now, the Tennessee legislature has some of the most restrictive laws on reproductive health. This must be changed to allow women, especially those who are victims of sexual violence, to be protected. Okay, couple of things. First off, why not Medicare for all? Or even better, why not nationalized
single
healthcare?
payer? Well, he as a state
I
rep.
mean, this is Tennessee, so state rep. So like,
Yeah.
you know, like, but yeah, Medicare for all for your state, number one. But number two, he kind of goes into, as you see at the bottom, he goes into reproductive rights.
Yep.
So kind of taking on the cultural talking point that you can argue the white media is pushing, you know, versus the actual crux, you know, in terms of the reason like healthcare for us is, for Black people, is especially important, which, as Tesla was trying to get him to say, does tie to reparations, which, and I'll make this argument, I think we talk about, and I think it's very easy to talk about reparations in terms of money. When I say reparations, I do not always mean money. I'm talking about economic empowerment, what Black people need to do to be able to fend for themselves. And if you don't have to worry about healthcare, then that's one shackle that is off, you know, Black people in particular, especially since we have, you know, the highest risk in terms of living, in terms of disease, in terms of birth, very high for us in our community. So the fact that he kind of dismissed how that's not
he didn't even
tied
talk
to,
about that. He didn't even talk about that in his reparations thing.
No.
Or any other economic. He gave no economic like support
no.
other than like credit check, whatever, which like he also didn't name a number there. Like he didn't mention how much is supposedly reparations. It's what, like it's like in the trillions, is it not?
Trillions.
Yeah,
Trillions.
it's like 7 trillion, I think, something like that.
About 10 right
like
now.
He didn't mention the exact number, even though me and you, who are nobodies generally, know that amount. Like he's supposed to be super smart. So
I do want to pull up this one.
You're right.
Oh. So actually move up. And then this is another one I just pulled just for today. Criminal justice and public safety. So I was looking to see anything in relation to defunding the police or anything like that. You could probably guess what he's going to say. Anyway, in Nashville, I vow to advocate for safer streets, a fairer criminal legal system, and social supports such as education and employment opportunities to help prevent and reduce crime in our city. Memphians should not have to choose between public safety and equitable treatment from the criminal legal system. While crime has plagued our city, Shelby County investment in policing, 38% of our 2023 budget, is among the highest rates for cities of our size. Black Tennesseans make up 17% of our state's population, yet 44% of Tennessee's prison population. I pledge to advocate for a different approach. Instead of investing in punitive measures to incarcerate people, as state representative, I will call for investments in proven methods, such as alternatives for incarceration for low-level offenses and diversion programs, to curb recidivism and reduce the number of Memphians incarcerated. Black and brown people are incarcerated and policed at a disproportionate rate, and these injustices have a long-lasting impact. For example, 1 in 5 system-impacted Black people in Tennessee have lost the right to vote. In Nashville, I will advocate for policies that will ensure that victims are heard during the criminal justice process. I will also advocate for diversion and restorative justice programming. Go down. That will give people who commit offenses a chance to take responsibility and be held accountable for their actions. There isn't one way to prevent crime and reduce incarceration in Memphis, but we must invest in a variety of comprehensive strategies, and again, we don't know what those are, to ensure that we are seeing the root.
I mean, sounds like a lot of reform, which we know what reform is. means.
Well, but he doesn't give any specifics though. He doesn't give like, let's try this, let's do this. It's more like we should try something. I pledge to do something, but he doesn't go into any like policy or anything. So this is just very vague, and I believe on purpose.
Yeah,
because
zero specifics.
Right. He doesn't want to alienate, because I think now he's kind of caught fire in a sense. He doesn't want to alienate now his white suburb bomb latte drinking base that he's growing. You know, he doesn't want to put them off of, right. He doesn't want to put them off in terms of advocating for him, you know, like now, especially that he stood up for their values. But he doesn't want to necessarily put off Black people who kind of caught whiff to him to actually say some things that seem kind of like he might be for defund the police, but he's not saying it explicitly in terms of, you know, like really fighting for our causes. Now, as you said, and you beat me to the punch, we have met someone a couple of weeks ago, and we have issues with him too. But has been very unapologetic in terms of reparations. And I went to his website, and he has a reparations plan on his website. You know, so you can look that up if you want. But we just want to remind you what he said a couple of weeks ago to potential Democratic candidate Marianne Williamson, having to kind of school her in terms of what he's looking for regarding reparations for Black people. And as you said, he's just down the street from where Justin is. And he's calling up for reparations for his district. So why can't Justin?
Maybe reach out even. You know?
Go ahead.
Engage.
Hi, yes, so I concur with a lot of things that you said. One, I ran for office, and I'm running yet again against the king maker, James Clyburn. But my attitude, if you're the king maker, then your district should be living like royalty, and they're not. So I know exactly how they try to shame you, exclude you, and slander your name. And my thing is this: we as Americans need to grow a backbone, okay? When did we start worrying? Well, see, I'm a Black American Gullah Geechee. We've always had to stand up and fight for everything. And I know you was talking about how things used to be. Well, I was born, my great-great-grandparents were still alive. My great-grandparents were all still alive except one. And they told me the good old days for y'all weren't good old days for them. So they're used to having to fight and be slandered and be excluded and be denigrated. I want to thank you for being, and I'm going to say this because they like to say man enough. I'm going to thank you, a woman, for being man enough to do not what's popular, not what's easy, but what's right. And you're running on a reparations platform. And that's the right thing to do. Now, I do want to give you some pointers, if you're open to it, about your reparations plan, because I face all kinds of backlash, which I gladly accept. I'm here for it. My ancestors who were fighting in these rice marshes and swamps didn't back down to the backlash. I will be an insult to my great-grandmother who died a 101 if I back down because of people saying mean things to me. One, reparations comes from the federal government. It does not come from your tax dollars. America pays reparations every single day. They're paying it to Ukrainians right now. They're paying it when they take care of people in the country illegally and go up to the trades. They paid it to the Japanese Americans who were interned. Even though my great-grandfather helped to save the Jews from the Nazis, he came back to America and he was locked out of the GI Bill, which gave trillions of dollars to mainly white veterans that they say built the middle class. And yet those same Jews right now are getting reparations. People in Guam.
Wait, I have to stop you.
Oh, that's what she gets pissed off at, right?
But anyway, so to summarize all of this, Justin Pearson is another Democratic shill that is looking to rise in the ranks, and he found an issue that now he's getting his 15 minutes of fame. And as I told Reef earlier, don't be surprised if he tries to run for Congress on the federal level or even Senate on the federal level for far too long. But this is just another guy who got lucky, I would argue, over an issue that affected, white people in his state and kind of within the culture means of what people are talking about right now, especially within the Democratic Party, but has no basis on trying to help Black people, has no basis of trying to support us in terms of anything that is specific to Black people, and ain't much any different than a lot of these other Black politicians that we see that the media is kind of throwing in our face in the name of, oh, here's someone who's Black. In this case, here's someone who's Black that talks with a certain cadence with a huge ass fro that's actually standing for all Black people. So,
but is he though?
Yeah. No.
But is he though?
I would always argue if a politician just pops up, like just out of the blue, then that's a red flag to me that run away.
Yep.
Because anyone who's seasoned, anyone who's really for the issues, like Kashama Sawan gets no play at all. But she's been active, or at least up until now, she's been actively working in Seattle to try and bring some actual change, to the working class in Seattle. You don't hear her on mainstream media at all. But you hear about this. But you hear this guy all of a sudden within the last 2 weeks as
everywhere,
shining
plastered.
star.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah. So don't take this guy seriously. He's just another shell.
Well,
moving
on. We're done. Hated it. All right.
You need to put down the combo.
I do. I gotta get that as well. But anyway,
but while Reef is getting our next story ready, thank you guys for watching on our special Saturday night stream. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to all the things.
Denver Attaway on the Rock Fins. What Collin is saying, in other words, is Afro Man is full of shit, and I concur. that's what was said. So
yep. So yeah.
Let's check Rumble. No one on the fake views at Rumble. Fake views. Leave me some comments if you're actually real on Rumble. Right there in the chat. I'm looking right at it. If you're not a fake view, like how many fake views does it say we have right now? I don't even know. But anyway, somebody will chat there probably. But anyway, I've got a story.
Moving from Tennessee to France. What you got?
Well, these two guys met recently. Macron and what was that? Jinping? What's his name? I think that's how you say it, right?
She, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. But do you ever see this movie? Pearson and SIZZLES? It's good.
No.
Audrey Hepburn, in the role of Meg Ryan, pretty much. It's like one of those classic rom-coms. But why can't I click? There we go. So Macron says Europe shouldn't follow the United States on China. So
China.
That's what's happening now. So this is from Dave DeCamp at antiwar.com. French President Emmanuel Macron said Sunday that Europe should not follow the U.S. and risk a confrontation with China over Taiwan as he was returning to France from a visit to Beijing, where he met with President Xi Jinping. In a conversation with Politico, Macron discussed his desire for Europe to have strategic autonomy and to become a third superpower. Glad he said superpower, not Reich, because that would have been more awkward. Which he said wouldn't be able to happen if Europe is involved in a conflict over Taiwan. He said Europe faces a great risk if it gets caught up in crises that are not ours, which prevent it from building its strategic autonomy. The French leader said in a crisis, Europeans might be overcome with panic and believe we are just American followers. You think?
Too late. People already think that.
Yeah, too late. He asked if a crisis over Taiwan would be in Europe's interest. The question Europeans need to answer excuse me, is it in our interest to accelerate a crisis on Taiwan? No. The worst thing would be to think that we Europeans must become followers on this topic and take our cue from the U.S. agenda and a Chinese overreaction, Macron said. Increasing U.S. support for Taiwan has made a conflict more likely as China has ramped up its military pressure on the island. The Chinese People's Liberation Army is currently conducting major exercises in the Taiwan Strait in response to U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's meeting with the Taiwan President, Tsai Ing-wen. Macron added that Europeans don't have the credibility to really threaten to intervene in Taiwan. Europeans cannot resolve the crisis in Ukraine. What? He just lets that slip out, huh?
Yeah.
How can we credibly say on Taiwan, watch out, if you do something wrong, we will be there? If you really want to increase tensions, that's the way to do it, he said. Macron broke up with the U.S. over Beijing's effort to push for peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. While in Beijing, Macron told Xi that he could count on the Chinese leader to bring Russia to its sense and bring everyone back to the negotiating table. Care Bear, what have we been seeing from China and Russia recently when it regards to peace deals?
That they've been kicking ass in that.
Yep. The position
that
is
they're
drastic.
more willing to do it.
Yes. And they're doing a pretty darn good job going to Saudi Arabia, Iran, like Africa, South America. Like, the position is drastically different from President Biden's as the White House came out against a ceasefire in Ukraine ahead of Xi's recent trip to Moscow and immediately rejected the idea of Beijing as a mediator after China released a 12-point peace plan. Can we see the American 12-point peace plan? Like 13 points for peace. Make it a baker's dozen for peace. Like, you know, like something. Meanwhile, top French court backs unpopular plans to raise retirement age to 64. So this is pretty much went through, essentially.
Yes.
What everyone was protesting about, right?
So
and
basically, France is going to continue going up in flames.
France is going to continue to burn, like, and they don't want any other fights right now. They're like, nope, we can't do that. We're already fucking up in Ukraine. We can't do that. He literally said that, but that's essentially what he said. So French top court on Friday approved the government's unpopular plan. Unpopular. That's how I love how they say that. This is CNN, by the way. Zaska Van Dorn. So please be aware. CNN. So the government's unpopular plan to raise the age of retirement by 2 years to 64. A huge win for President Emmanuel Macron in the face of mass protests across the country.
How are they going to call it? Well, it makes
It's
sense.
a win.
But how are they going to call this a win?
It's a win.
At the expense of the French. Wow.
Like, isn't that nice?
It's a win for the president to increase the retirement age so people suffer more.
Yeah.
Seriously?
So the Constitutional Council, akin to the U.S. Supreme Court, struck down some elements of the new law, but the most controversial elements remain. The gradual upping of the retirement age. So pension reform in France, where the right to retire on a full pension at 62 is deeply cherished, is always a highly sensitive issue, and even more so in recent months, with social discontent mounting over the surging cost of living. Right? So people can't afford to live even with their retirement. So that's part of it. The final approval of pension reforms, which followed 7 hours of debate within the 9-member council, is a victory for Macron 1 year into a second presidential term. But the unpopularity of the new law has come at a great political cost, with his approval ratings at near record low levels.
Yeah, he's done. He's done. After this. So, and I think he knows it too.
Oh yeah, which is why he's saying the stuff in the previous article, because he knows he's done.
But I think it's just the idea of doing this one thing for the corporations before he checks out. Get this one little thing, and we will take care of you, but fuck everybody else. That's kind of what this reminds me of.
Very much
like
so.
a la Obama, essentially. Like,
Obama.
do our shit, screw over the people, and and it doesn't matter if you get kicked out or whatever, then you're fine. Well, you'll be fine. You'll continue to be rich and living off of that, and so
as part of the ruling, the Constitutional Council also refused a first request by the opposition lawmakers to hold a referendum on the reform. Right? So, like, no, we're not doing a referendum. Like, then we're definitely not getting it.
Right.
A last-minute second request put forward Thursday to hold a referendum on the reform remains under consideration. They're like, nah, I think we should still, like, let the people say some shit. Like, that's essentially... So Macron's government has said the reform is necessary to keep the pension system's finances out of the red in the coming years. So where's that money going, homeboy?
Right.
De donde es dinero? Where's it at? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, after the ruling, heightened security was in place in Paris amid expectations of spontaneous protests. That's what they're calling them. Spontaneous.
Right.
They're fun, spontaneous. They're like a good boyfriend. Like, Macron is now expected to enact the law this weekend. From September, the first retirees will have to wait an additional 3 months for their state pensions. Trace, that's 3 months.
Right.
That, Jesus Christ, for pensioners to get their money. Could you imagine your, like, grandmama wasn't going to get her Social Security for 3 months? Could you imagine?
Yeah, I can't.
I
honestly can't. No.
Like, somebody going to get fucking lit up. That's what I'm saying. Somebody's got, a pair is definitely going to sizzle. Is all I'm saying. Like, the French government will now be hoping that the protests, which had already shown signs of waning, will come to an end. Yeah, good fucking luck. Maybe you should have listened. They're like, well, anyway. But speaking to CNN in Paris, some protests said they would remain in the streets. No shit, CNN. We are going to keep protesting because we need to be respected. People want to be respected towards social rights and social justice. We are against this pension reform. Another protester, Jean-Baptiste Red, said the leader of the French union, CGT, one of France's main unions, has called for a historic protest on May 1st. Keep that in mind. May 1st, gonna be
that's my birthday. That's the day before my birthday, so we should definitely watch. Oh, we should watch this anyway. But
all French people, definitely note down the date. We have to be in the street to stop this law from coming into force, Sophie Benet said. The head of CGT told CNN's affiliate, BFM TV, vowing that protests will continue. The lives of French men and women do not depend on the opinion of 9 people, she said. Fucking exactly. Good for you.
Look, one thing to say.
Yes.
Look how quickly.
Oh, yeah. They're like, oh, no, we ain't doing that.
Like, look how quickly
they organize
to protest.
Yeah.
That's in 2 weeks. A little over 2 weeks that they're already like, get out there.
Yeah.
Like, it would take us like years.
Oh, honestly. Yeah. We'd be like, maybe in a couple of months. What was, oh, no, we know this. We know our timing of organizing. Amazon labor union head Christian Smalls, when did he want a general strike? When was that?
Next year.
Next year, homie. Next year.
He was saying this last year. He wanted it for next year.
They've just been protesting, and they're like, nah, May 1st, we back out here, dog. Like, you know.
Even it's just more the idea of like, we're staying here, and we're going to make it bigger.
We're going to get in the second half. Like, you know, they're getting pep talks in the locker room right now. That's what they're getting, you know. But I wanted to, this is the last last paragraph, and there's some doozies in here too. So opposition parties have also signaled they will fight on against the plans. Far-left leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon said the decision shows the council is more attentive to the needs of presidential monarchy than those of the sovereign people. While the far-right's Marine Le Pen urged those who oppose the changes to vote for her at the next election. What does that sound like?
Vote for Trump. That's basically what it is, and not do shit. I mean, she won't change it.
But it's also the left leaders are willing to let them have this lane because they're not willing to listen to the people on this because their corporate overlords told them they need this. So even, and this is worse, this is the CNN. CNN had to CNN, right? So this is going to piss you off as much as it did me. Even with the changes, France's new retirement age will still be below the norm in Europe and in many other developed economies where the age at which full pension benefits apply is 65 and is increasingly moving towards 67. So they're saying even with this, France is still better. France is still better than everywhere else.
But it doesn't justify the idea of you moving it up.
No. And that you won't talk to the people about it. Even when your own government body told you, you should have a referendum not once, but twice. Well, I told you twice. The state pensions in France are also more generous than elsewhere. At nearly 14% of GDP in 2018, the country's spending on state pensions is larger than in most other countries, according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. First of all, I doubt it's enough. Second of all, fuck you. like, you know, like what? The government further inflamed anger earlier this year by using executive powers to force the changes through Parliament. So, everyone's like, now we got to take it to the courts. The courts are like, we'll do it, but you should really talk to the people first. They seem upset. You know, like
as if the bonfires have not given any indication.
Yeah. Well, they haven't made it to their houses yet. You know, so.
Yeah, Gamer in the chat says, I think Macron, he is done.
Yeah,
and as I said,
that cookie burnt. That cookie burnt. Like,
so,
Macron ain't no.
He had to do one last thing in the name of the establishment before he either gets pushed out or he's thrown out. It'd be interesting to see what is going to happen within the next year or so. But
could we throw this guy out? Can we?
Yeah. Well,
can we throw this guy out?
Well, speaking of us, meanwhile, like the French establishment is doing that to them, and meanwhile, our establishment is doing this to us. But I mean, this was kind of look. We've reported on this for a while. I've mentioned it in several live streams ago that this is happening. It's happening in next month. But aspect of our emergency actually just ended Monday. So this I think this kind of went under the radar kind of this week, but I felt it was important to report on this. But Joe Biden, I would say almost kind of quietly, ended our national emergency in regards to COVID. All right. This article is from Politico, written by Kelly Garrett, where she says, actually, you can zoom out. Thank you. The White House initially announced plans to extend the national emergency as well as the public health emergency until May 11th. So, just to clarify, Biden has not ended the public health emergency. That's still going on until May. But the national emergency is done. So we're no longer in pandemic mode, as you could say.
Yeah. Which means
President Joe Biden.
Which mainly means we're not gonna have things like rent assurance and Like, yeah, it's no
So
more money, people. It's over.
So no more money. And as I said, if you have bills, any of those medical bills or any bills that could probably go in collections because they have not gone after people, from what I understand, quite as hard, if at all, fuck that now. Like, now will go after you now. So please make sure if you do have any of those extraneous bills that can, go into collections and fuck up your credit, please take care of that as soon as possible.
Please.
But anyway, Biden on Monday signed a House bill immediately ending the COVID-19 national emergency, first enacted during the Trump administration in 2020. The White House initially announced plans to extend the COVID-19 national emergency as well as a public health emergency until May 11th. But shortly after, House Republicans put forth bills to end both imminently. The bill that the president signed into law on Monday ended only the national emergency. The White House voiced opposition to the bill, saying the resolutions would be a grave disservice to the American people. But you signed the bill anyway, so okay. In a statement of administration policy, the Biden administration said that an abrupt end to the emergency declarations would create wide-ranging chaos and uncertainty throughout the healthcare system. Despite this, Biden told Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer last month that he did not plan to veto it, marking the second time in recent weeks that the president has signaled opposition to a Republican-sponsored bill, only to later decline to veto it. Last month, Biden told the Senate that he would not veto a GOP-backed bill that would repeal changes to the D.C. criminal code, a move that came as a surprise to Democrats. Ending the national emergency would end the use of some waivers for federal health programs meant to help healthcare providers during the height of the pandemic. The law Biden signed Monday did not affect the public health emergency, which is still set to expire in May, along with the Trump-era Title 41 border policy. We've talked about that before on this show.
Yep.
In a statement of administration policy objecting to the GOP bills seeking to end the pandemic emergencies, the White House warned that an abrupt end to the public health emergency and Title 42 would prove particularly problematic and could allow thousands of immigrants per day into the country immediately without the necessary policies in place.
Yep.
Oh, so actually that's it. So very short article. So yeah, as Misty says.
Oh, yes.
We're fucked.
Yep.
Yep.
But yeah, this has been a while coming, and as I said, many streams ago, and I'm still making this prediction. The second half of this year is going to be a dark one for many people.
Yep.
Like COVID, whatever you want to say. Basically, now Biden saying without saying, as I said earlier, COVID is now endemic. So now, any care that you need, you're basically on your own. And considering our shitty healthcare, considering how people weren't helped, still are not being helped, and basically giving the middle finger now, definitely by May.
Well, bad cookies in the chat. Gee, wonder why they hired so many IRS agents. Yeah, yes.
Well, yeah, and yes, and again, this is kind of their plot. Again, this is not the IRS. That's not for the millionaires, billionaires, corporates.
Yeah.
This is for us. And again, they've been in limbo for the last 3 years because they had no justification. They couldn't, go after people like us in terms of any bills or anything like that. But now they can. So, but I did want to play this clip from PBS NewsHour regarding this end essentially to COVID emergency and the implications of that, especially for those. And you can make the argument for financial whatever, but there's still the idea of people still having long COVID. That's something that Jimmy Dore has reported on, and then other people have reported on that still are trying to make do with it.
And he still has to say things like that. That's not the case. because CDC guidelines haven't changed. So
Right. But
YouTube, which
you
goes
gotta,
off the CDC guidelines, I mean, he literally has said multiple times before everyone else that we were working towards it, that this is going to be endemic, that like most everyone will get it. So,
but it's the idea of long COVID, which I know a few of my friends have.
Yes.
That, and it's a new thing.
Johnny Graz.
People forget, like, this is a new thing that needs to be studied in terms of how to properly treat people, especially since, from what I understand, people have different symptoms regarding long COVID.
Yeah. And they aren't going to help you now that this crisis is over.
They're not going to help you now. Right. They're not going to help you now. We don't have universal health care.
And unless you say those vaccines also injured, you're not going to get that either.
Right.
So
I do want to play, and you can play the whole thing. But actually, there's someone in here that might be surprised. You might be surprised as to having long COVID. So, but yeah, you can go ahead and play the clip.
Since the start of the pandemic, both former President Trump and President Biden have repeatedly renewed a special declaration of a national and public health emergency. But the government's approach toward COVID has dramatically changed. And yesterday, the president said he would allow that emergency declaration to end in May. William Brangham looks at what that will mean.
Now, this is the government essentially saying that COVID-19 isn't as grave a threat as it once was, and thus certain policies can be phased out. House Republicans have been pressuring the administration to make this exact move. But COVID is still killing more than 500 Americans every single day on average, and has cumulatively killed well over 1 million of us. Joining me now is Lawrence Gostin, who tracks all of this very closely. He's at Georgetown University's Global Health Institute. Larry Gostin, great to have you back on the program. I mentioned the GOP pressure on the administration. House Republicans just introduced this bill called the Pandemic is Over Act, which would basically do what the administration says they're going to do. Do you think the administration wanted to do this, or is this bowing to political pressure?
You know, I think it's a little of both, William. I mean, certainly all emergencies have to come to an end, and we've been at this COVID emergency for 3 years now, you know, originally with President Trump declaring it in January 2020. But there has been enormous pressure. I mean, it's certainly from Congress, it's from Republican governors, it's from the public that just seems to be so fatigued and over COVID, and even from its own agency. The Food and Drug Administration is planning on cycling to seasonal COVID shots the way we do flu shots. So all of this is a strong political signal that we need to move on, but we need to have a soft landing. And I think that's why the administration has put this back until May 11th.
So practically speaking, when the government says that the public health emergency is over, what does that mean? What follows?
Well, you know, first we have to be clear that, you know, the crisis is still here, and particularly for the vulnerable. You mentioned more than 500 deaths a day. You know, that's, you know, twice the average flu season, but that's in a severe flu season. We've got, you know, COVID exploding in China. We've got variants and subvariants that are on the horizon. And so for the young and healthy, it may be over, but for the vulnerable, it's not. What this is going to mean is that it's going to unravel a whole social safety net. People will find it harder to get health insurance, particularly Medicaid, the Children's Health Insurance Program, Veterans Administration benefits, and even private insurance. It'll start to cost money for tests, therapeutics, and ultimately for vaccines as we transition to the private market. That means that the uninsured, the underinsured, the poor are going to really lack access the way they've been accustomed to doing it now. CDC is going to have a lot more trouble getting data from the states and doing surveillance. And there's also implications even for Title 42, which is the program that expels asylum seekers coming to the United States.
What is the implication for Title 42? Because I know that this has been another one of these political hot potatoes that has been fought over. If you declare the emergency is over, does that change Title 42 in any real way?
It actually does. Title 42 itself is not dependent on a formal declaration of a public health emergency. But if you actually look at CDC's original order, the order says that it stays in place until CDC decides to take it down or until a formal declaration of emergency is over. So on May 11th, like it or not, Title 42 is gone unless for some reason CDC would issue a fresh order. CDC won't do that because my understanding is CDC has never been in favor of this because it's really not justified by public health. It's really more a border control policy and an inhumane one at that.
You wrote on Twitter that this is the equivalent of waving the white flag of surrender. Do you really think that that's the case? I mean, given, as you're describing, that Congress has kind of done this, the American public has certainly decided we're done with this. So what are we surrendering to?
I worry that when the next variant or subvariant comes, that it has more immune escape ability, perhaps even more pathogenic or deadly. That when CDC says put on a mask or get your booster shot, that people's eyes may roll. And I think it's fine for the young and the healthy, but I really worry about the poor, the uninsured, those with deep underlying health conditions and vulnerabilities. I think they are at grave risk, and that's what really worries me the most. I do understand, and I agree with President Biden that all emergencies do eventually come to an end, but I wish we would be able to have a safe landing in the sense that we really protect the health care insurance and social safety net for the most vulnerable among us because they're still at grave risk.
Larry Gostin of Georgetown University, always good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, William. I appreciate it.
Actually, I thought that was another clip that I was going to show but did not put in here. But actually, Tim Kaine actually has long COVID.
Okay.
But you notice what that doctor said at the very end?
Yeah, I mean, I was my inside my head, I was just like that's pretty much, yeah. I mean, he wished. I think what was it? He wished that the next iteration of he said very specifically, not like next virus, like next variation, right? So
yeah.
Like to be more deadly. That's what he said.
Right.
So that like people took it more seriously and would wear their mask.
Right.
Like
but he also said, the calls for boosters and all of that for the young and healthy will just roll their eyes and that will be okay.
Yeah.
There have been plenty of people in this space for the last 3 years that have been saying that. Most notably Jimmy Dore, who has said this. But those people were shunned. Those people had their channels basically taken down in the name of saying that as misinformation, that everyone had to get a shot. You didn't have a choice. If you didn't, then you couldn't do a damn thing.
It's safe and effective, Collin. Collin is safe and effective.
Now it's the idea of like, oh, now we're kind of over it. It's like, okay.
It definitely reduces transmission. It definitely does. It still does.
Right. But it's the idea of what he said, like, if you're old and vulnerable, then, which was what people were saying.
Yes.
From the beginning.
Yes.
Focus on, and this is when I first watched Jimmy Dore, like, more especially, that's what he was saying. Focus on the older and the vulnerable first.
Yeah.
And then everyone else can take care of after that. But instead, they kind of lumped this all together. And then once the vaccine was available, it's like everyone had to take it or else. And the people who were very hesitant, who made us think about it, got called names, got called everything but a child of God. And the media kind of went along with all of that for up until now. Like the idea of like, it's now okay to be like almost against the vaccine or boosters now. Whereas over a year ago or 2 years ago, that wasn't the case at all. So it's just kind of funny now that the threat is over and like Pfizer and all these other big pharma have gotten their money and will continue to get more money because now you have to pay for COVID tests now. You're no longer going to get them for free.
Which a lot of businesses will still require them. I'm betting.
Right.
Right.
And even with them, they have an expiration date. So you can't use them like after like I probably have like maybe 10 of them right now that I probably can't. I have to check, but technically you can, well, actually they don't work. Like you don't get a read off of them, at least the ones I have, like after a certain point. So they may be shot now that I probably will have to end up throwing them away. And now you have to pay like upwards of $20 for them now. Like in the pharmacy or whatever.
But Jimmy was on this endemic crap for a long time. I mean, he was listening to smarter people in the room as well,
Right.
Plenty of doctors said the same thing.
And people in our space, like Rob Durgan, like our brother in the network, was saying all of this too. Way back when.
Webb, Whitney, definitely.
Franco, all those folks were kind of Slow News Day.
Convo.
All those folks called that out. And
bunch
got their
of
channels
people.
essentially
Peter
destroyed.
McCullough, like bunch of doctors, the Barrington Declaration, all those cats, so all said the same thing, and they were called quacks for saying it was going to be endemic. So fun stuff.
And now without saying it is. So, but like I said, try and get your bills together. If because not to say we got help, but we're definitely not going to get any help now.
Speaking of help, pre-K workers take the fight to Mayor Adams. But
Playing to your co-host.
I know, right? Just for the people at home, you teach pre-K, yes?
Correct.
Okay. And you get stuff thrown at your head, and you gotta dip, duck, and dive things, and
those of you who are not on Twitter, I posted this last week, and you probably can't see it now, but at least here. But like, I got a cut on the.
Actually, a little bit.
I can. Yeah, here. Got a cut here from a student.
Hey man, kid's got good elbows. You taught him well.
He has good elbows and a good arm. I'll say that. He needs to go into either baseball or some discus.
Yeah, discus.
Because essentially that's what he threw at me in order to get this cut.
Nice.
So, but I wouldn't change my job for the world, though. I love it. But but what's going on in New York?
Who is this? Is from Labor Notes, I think, is who I had it from.
Yes.
So New York pre-K workers fight for their jobs in spite of their union, and that's the big deal I wanted to mention, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your union says you can't strike, yes?
Yeah. Well, my district says I
district says, right. So
yes,
Mayor Eric Adams is slowly dismantling free pre-K, the signature program of his predecessor. Go ahead.
No, I said, oh God, but keep going.
Yeah. By layoffs and by leaving sites unpaid for months. Again, months. These accessed instructional coordinators and social workers are fighting back. So just days before school started last fall, 400 early childhood education workers in New York City were told they were being accessed. What the fuck does that mean?
What?
Like, what do you know what that means? What is accessed?
They were fired.
Like,
because
sure.
It's the idea of like there's too many of them.
Yeah.
But I argue it's New York.
Yes.
So there needs to be a lot, and I need to, and I probably should look into this a little bit more. But at the end of the day, this is what it comes down to: money. This is about money because early childhood is expensive because they're young. The older you get, the less money, like per student, that a public school would have to take on. But especially like if you're talking about like, let's say a daycare, like early childhood costs a lot.
Yeah.
But I would make the argument is if they are the most impressionable years of your life, I would think, well, this has been proven, if you focus on the early grades, you're not as likely to get into a lot of the issues that students get when they're older. But of course, we're trying to be cheap in this country. And so there isn't necessarily that investment, in early childhood. And many of these early child care workers are working, especially if you're working in a daycare, they make no money.
Yeah.
Like that's why for me, like it's more profitable to be at a public school. Because at least then I'd be able to get paid, in terms of like what my district offers. If you're in a childcare, whether public or private, they're not going to make that much.
Yeah.
So it's usually like, and I think we've talked about this, a couple of streams ago, like typically it's usually way below minimum wage. Well, not even living wage, I should say. Sometimes it could be below minimum wage.
This whole accessed, like it sounds like he got a priest in, like the workers sprang into action, and in January they want a short-term reinstatement, but they're still fighting for long-term job stability as the administration of Mayor Eric Adams slowly dismantles his predecessor, Bill de Blasio's signature program, Universal Pre-K. So we talked about that when it happened too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we did.
So Eric Adams, who we've covered frequently before as well, trying to fuck the crumb that we got. So, and not only are they fighting the city, they've also had to fight their union, the United Federation of Teachers, everyone's favorite terrible union. With 180,000 members, the UFT is the largest teachers union in the country and a powerful force in city politics. But members can tell you the union is a slumbering giant where activism is suppressed.
Does not surprise me at all.
No, not a surprise at all. The workers on the chopping block were instructional coordinators who support teachers with developmentally appropriate curriculum and social workers who assist students with specific behavior needs and collaborate with families. Many of these workers support 10 or more school sites. So the city tried to cut all instructional coordinators and social workers across public charter and private schools that receive public funding, all without offering any support to replace them. Accessing go ahead.
So basically, they're getting rid of all the supports and throwing it all. Initially, I thought it was just teachers. So basically, they're cutting the support systems to support the teachers and basically throwing all the work.
Keep in mind, even today in our previous story, we talked about how they're ending Medicaid, that kind of stuff. They're ending,
right?
So for this. Who needs pre-K the most? Do you think it's the kids or the parents who need somewhere where their child to be for 8 hours?
Well, not only that, but it's the idea of like which demographics need universal pre-K the most.
Yes. Because the ones that need a place for their children to go so that they have childcare, so that both parents can go work to afford everything else that child needs and they need to survive in a world where we know cost of living, especially in New York, is extremely high. So
I used to do this, like, for on-campus purposes, my many jobs in the field. Essentially, I was a social worker, and I had to support families. I had to help families get vouchers in order for them to afford to pay. Well, it was free for them because they were homeless.
Yes.
So I had to get vouchers from the state to ensure that their child can go to school. So the idea that you're cutting like a program like that off from people in New York City, you know, that's disastrous, especially among low-income families. Who need that care.
So, and it's they're not even just they're just making it way hard. So, accessing is an on-ramp to firing. Workers lose their positions, forcing them to apply to other positions, wait in the reserve system to be assigned each day to any site, or leave the school system altogether. So that's, you have to be anywhere in New York suddenly. Like, that's what that means? You're on call now?
Yeah, they're on call.
For the entirety of New York, for children they don't know, they've never worked with, like...
Right. Yeah.
Jesus
and
Christ.
given transportation, given like, it could be, depending where in the city they are, it could be very hard to travel, you know, like to and from, you know, especially if you're taking public transportation, it can take upwards of an hour or more just to get between boroughs.
And that's if you have transportation.
Well,
which like,
and even if you're driving, it's still going to be maddening, you know, but you know, that's all at the expense of the social staff, the support staff of these schools.
Here's how they went about it. So, frustrated with unanswered pleas to the union and the city, the accessed workers started organizing themselves. They found support from a rank and file caucus, the movement of rank and file educators. So that's how they're doing it. They're getting around their union by essentially reorganizing.
Organizing themselves, right.
Yes. So they met by the hundreds each day at noon on Zoom, trying to figure out how to stop the slow walk firings. What does that sound like, Care Bear?
Sounds like they're looking to strike.
Yeah, I mean...
Or like protest, you know? So, but to me, it's the very idea of the union wasn't supporting them. And I've said this, you know, even like with my own union, like I felt like they did everything not protest in a way that would challenge our mayor, given that last year she was up for re-election and we haven't had a contract up until that point. We just got our contract renewed, but we have to go and talk for it again in the fall. So
I mean, to me, sounds like
unity doesn't represent what you're against; it represents what you are for.
That's what it sounds like.
There you go.
These motherfuckers found an issue. They knew that issue was a big deal. They organized over that issue. So after a rally, the Department of Education sent them an email telling them to return to their sites until further notice. So they were back on the job, but it was impossible to do long-term planning since they never knew if they'd still have their jobs the next day. The workers continued to reach out to their union, the UFT, which refused to meet with them. They blasted elected officials with emails and phone calls to inform them of the crisis, and they teamed up with the leaders of early childhood sites that had not been paid since the Adams administration came to power in January 2022. So
well over a year they haven't got paid.
Literally the site hasn't been paid. Not just like individuals. Like that's a pre-K not being paid. So yeah. Claiming it had inherited a messy system.
That's no excuse.
No fucking excuse.
No fucking, and that's the same thing in DCPS that they're saying, in terms of the back pay that we receive. Oh, it's going to take time because
the system we made is so terrible.
Right. Like, we most people get their checks directly through their bank account.
Yeah.
Figure it out. It shouldn't take that long, honestly. You have our information.
So the admin left sites waiting months for payments owed. Many site leaders had to take out personal loans.
Jesus Christ.
To continue their work. Loans. Personal loans. That means they fucking mortgaged their house. Or whatever they were like. Holy shit.
I don't understand. And this is kind of the cop-out that I have with early childhood in general, because there's so many policymakers who know better and say, early childhood education is extremely important. We need to invest in it, blah, 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 blah. We need teachers who are qualified to do all of this, But they don't put in the investment.
No.
Never do. And it's a calling to do this. As I said, I got hit at. I got injured on the job. And it's like,
where the fuck's AOC at?
She'll argue this is not,
bro, this is your constituent. This is your.
Probably. Well, no, not even that. Where's Jamal Bowman? He's a teacher.
We're both of them. Both of them.
No. AOC, no.
No, I know, but I'm saying they're both at, like, AOC's Bronx, like,
right.
Brooklyn.
AOC, right.
Like, so, yeah, I mean, who else is repping New York? Like, I'm sure people will tell us in chat.
Hakeem Jeffries.
Right.
I mean,
like
Torres.
Yeah.
Those are the ones I know off the top of my head. Like,
and they're not saying anything, and it's because it's Eric Adams. That's why they're not saying anything. It's
right.
Yeah,
but God forbid if it were
Republican, they'd be all over this.
God forbid.
And it's not. They don't. They're doing this quietly. They're like, this is like quiet firing on to pre-K workers. They had to take out personal loans. Like,
what the fuck?
Like, these actions are the city's ways of defunding and dismantling early childhood education for New York, making it impossible for sites to function, so that many have shuttered or are closed to insolvency. Meanwhile, the city's bolstering the police budget by $5.5 billion with a B. Billion, while cutting library and K-12 school budgets significantly.
Yeah.
So, and this is education across the board, not just pre-K.
This is happening. It's happening in my district. Like, we're getting cuts. We're getting less funding.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So this is public education for you folks.
Teachers Union of America is in the pocket of the Democratic Party. No Democrat will fight them. With them blessed, they don't get donation from Teachers Union. Yeah. So
yeah. So that's why. Yeah. So that's a lot of that's a huge reason why a lot of these unions are basically.
So watch this fucking anti-organizing shit. So reacting to the organizing. City Council called a hearing that put early childhood education deputy chancellor Dr. Kara Ahmed and her team under fire. So they pushed it to them.
Good.
Right? Workers, this is workers, site directors, and members of the Moore Caucus gave powerful testimony. The next day, Dr. Ahmad's top financial person left the department.
Good.
Sure. The same month, instructional coordinators and social workers wrote an open letter to the UFT and the American Federation of Teachers the National Teachers Union about their union's complete failure to support them. AFT Randy Weingarten responded in a private email. It was only after this pressure that the UFT finally hopped on board.
So hold on. So Randy like we've talked about this chick before. She is no advocate. She is no advocate. She's another Democratic show. So the fact that she didn't do this, like, she's all about Ukraine. She went over to Ukraine to support the teachers over there. And that was a public issue.
Yeah.
But you can be an advocate for New York teachers, you know, like in the same way. Like, what the fuck?
And here's where I'm upset. The workers are planning to hold a rally in November, inviting media and elected officials. The UFT offered to have President Michael Mulgrew speak, and the workers said yes, because where Mulgrew goes, the media goes. Bullshit! Like, the media is following, like, Lady Gaga, not Mulgrew, who sounds like the worst Harry Potter character. Like, what? Like, you know, instructional coordinators and social workers have been asking the UFT to conduct a union-wide vote of no confidence in Dr. Ahmed, and the union obliged. The workers put in long hours drafting the language of the vote with the UFT, and it went out to the entire union. None of this would have happened if these workers and teachers didn't reorganize themselves.
Right.
That's what happened. So, like, keep that in mind. That none of this good would have happened without exactly what this organization didn't want to happen happened. So, workers got speakers together and prepared them. They can continue to face tension with the union over who would control the rally. Mulgrew ended up not showing.
That sounds familiar in this space.
Yup. But Mulgrew ended up not showing, but other UFT leaders were present, and overall workers felt the rally was impactful because of the turnout and media coverage. So Mulgrew didn't show up, but the media did. How's that work?
And this is, again,
learn you something. Learn you something. Learn you something.
It's the idea of not winning. It's the idea to force mainstream media to cover it, but have it, as we say on, we should make this a shirt, seize the means
of production.
Control. No, not that, but like seize control of the narrative.
Yeah.
Like you have to flip things in a way where you're able to control it and have your voices heard, that you're able to share what your grievances on your terms. And that's exactly what they did here.
In January, workers scored a big win. They got noticed and their positions were secured for the rest of the 22-23 school year. Also, the Department of Education would have learning walks where Dr. Ahmed and other leaders would tour school sites with early childhood workers and learn about their work. These felt like concrete next steps to long-term stability. This is all fucking...
I have a problem with this.
Oh, I know.
I have a huge...
Because, you know, they're just there for, like, free coffee that day, and, like...
No, but the fact that this shouldn't... I get the idea of learning walks, but that... Because I do it at my school, but, like... But the idea of, like, having a chancellor going in... Technically, and we have to look her up to see what her credentials are.
Yeah.
But a chancellor for a department for early childhood should not have to do that.
Yeah, that should be. It shouldn't have to be told to do that, for one.
Right.
Like,
but
she should just be invested in all of the schools all of the time.
Right. But then the idea is like, oh, I've never done this before, which again, even in that is kind of messed up.
Yes.
Like, you should know the issues within your schools and be able to advocate for them.
It's also glad handing. It's literally that too. It's, I'm coming to show up and shake your hand and then I'm not talking to you after that. I mean, that's literally what they're saying here. The workers wanted to debrief with DOE leadership after the learning walks, but the UFT restricted the meeting to union leaders only.
Bullshit.
Bullshit. DOE officials are now telling us how much they also value you. They assured members in a letter afterwards. It's the result of the vote of no confidence was also never publicized. After many asks, the UFT blamed members, of course they did, saying not enough people had voted and refused to release the numbers to anyone.
Hashtag release the numbers.
Yeah, like what? So, new year, same limbo. Now schools are beginning to plan for next year. Instructional coordinators and social workers have no clue what to expect. In that open letter they sent to UFT leaders this week, signed by 89 people signed this letter. How many people just voted in that thing that you said weren't enough? Like, they're demanding to be at the negotiating table for their jobs, or at least to know what the union is doing on their behalf. Workers went to union headquarters on April 3rd for an executive board meeting to present their demands. The UFT claimed it has a meeting scheduled with the DOE after spring break, but it refused to allow workers into that meeting. Their own union is keeping these workers at arm's length from decisions that affect them most. It's one thing to fight your boss. It's another to fight your union, one said. No, it ain't. That's the same thing.
Right.
The energy that should be going to support school sites is instead spent doing the work that union leaders are already paid to do. The fuck you... But if you had done your job, they wouldn't be here. Though it's been exhausting, yes, their organizing has led to unprecedented events. Never before has a block of workers, accessed en masse, stayed in their positions this long. UFT leaders often claim that new management can manage how they want, but workers are saying they will decide what their fates are. Good for them. They know their work is essential. They know they have community support, and they're ready to keep fighting. And that's my point here today. If you're in fucking New York and you're not like vocal about this right now, and you're not helping those specific people, like, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that like the community's gonna have to come together here. Like those parents of those kids, you need to be out here.
But it sounds like, thanks to these organizers that they've been doing the work, that families are on board.
Yeah.
With them. So, and that's kind of what I called out my union for over a month ago, like talking to one of the representatives there, is that you're talking among teachers. You already have the buy-in among teachers. You need to have support from parents, and especially my parents, because my parents are rich. Like, and my parents are very connected in DC. One phone call from any one of my parents, that's mainstream media for locally here. You know, like, would bring attention to certain issues. You know, but they never do that because in many cases, a lot of these unions are at the hand of these corporations as well. They don't want to fuck up the relationship that they have with them as well.
Yeah.
So, and I think also in the case like in DC, you know, our union, you know, when it came to re-election, our union endorsed, didn't endorse our mayor. You know, they went with her challenge. So basically right there, you know, like that put, you know, that wasn't good, you know, in terms of that relationship. But, you know, nevertheless, I just feel for this because this is why I'm in Power Ed. This is why I'm in the group that I'm in right now, because, and I actually was speaking to a couple of teachers on Tuesday about this, because they asked me what is different about you guys that is different from the union. And I said, we're not establishment.
Yeah.
That's the main difference. We can do whatever we want and say the fuck we want because we don't have those kind of ties. So, you know, and good on these organizers for actually doing the work. Too bad that our Congress people, Bowman, looking at you, like it's not saying shit about this, you know.
Yeah.
But and this should be
Any
this
New
should get
York
a lot more
reps,
attention.
like, yeah. No, I agree.
But
well,
yeah.
2
Thank you
hours
for
later.
2 hours
thank
later.
you for thank you for pulling that story.
Yeah.
Thank you for at least you ended with a somewhat hopeful
Good one. Yeah, it's I mean
tonight.
Yeah, it's a bunch of bullshit in that story though, so but anyway,
I'll take this. I'll take this though. So
tomorrow night, how do we miss that? I'm pretty sure. Not sure what we're gonna cover. I'm hoping we get into some of that Discord leak stuff.
Right.
That'll be good.
Monday
what else we got?
Monday night alternative angle. I guess that's Crab and Chris's show that they now named.
Yep.
They're on 9:30. Yep. Tuesday, I believe Indy said he and Jesse are going to be on, but check Twitter to confirm.
That'll be
It's an American tradition.
That
so-
show.
Yeah. Wednesday we'll have INN news, but I will not be here because I am on vacation next week. So I'll be away. So Reef, I leave it in your capable hands.
I'll have a guest on.
But he'll
Research
let
some
you know.
few.
I promise Reef I'll do some extra clips because he doesn't like being alone without me.
No.
So I promise him I will do some extra clips with him before I go. So definitely check those out next week while I'm away.
Yeah.
And is Tara gonna be live next week?
Possibly. She's gonna be traveling, so look out for what she's up to there. She's doing a thing with Diane Saar and then a whole little event, I think. So go to Diane Saar's Twitter. You should see information about that. I think I have the photo if I pull it up real quick. I think I saved this actually because I'm a smart boy.
But yeah, people in the chat, I'm wondering, should we, not on a regular thing, but should we do INN news every once in a while on a Saturday? Let us know. I actually kind of like doing this.
So yeah, April 22nd, 1 to 5 p.m. in Manhattan. Tickets at sarforsenate.com. They got Larry Sharp and Scott Ritter and Tara Reid and Jose Vega. So yeah, check that out. Indy said tune in tomorrow night for How Did We Miss That? So Oz is probably going to be doing a show later, I imagine. I imagine that's going to be on Rockfin. So go check out Oz the Boomer's channel and find that stuff.
So yeah, people like Saturday.
All right.
So you might need to consider, not all the time, but like every once in a while.
Yeah, when there's days when there's not fights.
Yeah.
So I gotta watch my soaps.
Yeah, that's one of the one of the big reasons why Reef doesn't stream on Saturdays. Is because
I gotta watch the UFC, man. Dana's got me hooked.
Right. But I mean, it's just, but yeah, I think that's something we can consider every once in a while.
Yeah.
You know, I think it also helps in terms of stories that we're actually really able to see.
Yeah.
What stories are really worth covering, versus like in the middle of the week when it may not be as clear.
Yeah.
But yeah, fam, thank you guys for tuning in regardless and watching us. As we say, please like, share, sub. You guys are fans, so you know the thing. But especially if you're new, thank you for tuning in.
You know the thing.
You know the thing. Do the things. Follow us. All our links are down in the description. You can check us out anynews.network. You can find me and Reef and all our other people within the network. Our links there. Check us out on Twitter at GetAnyNews for updates on our shows and anything else that we're doing.
Yep.
So
You can find all the links to all the network channels and members at indienews.network, rolling across the screen right there. Crab would be upset at us if we didn't mention you should become a member if you haven't. That's appreciative. We also have ways to donate right there at indienews.network.com. You can find that. We'd love some money occasionally. You know, our grift is small, but you can help our grift more. But you know, anyway,
yeah. I had a person online yesterday say like, "Oh, you're just doing this to be famous." I'm like, "Okay, go away."
Yeah,
you know?
like whatever.
So, whatever.
But anyway, as always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Bye, have a great time.